Hello, and welcome back to the Rise and Recreate podcast, a place where we hear stories of reinvention, strength, courage, resilience, and we find out that we all have the power inside of us to recreate our lives whatever the heck we want. I'm your host, Raechel Shanny, and today I am joined by Nadine, who is a spiritual mentor in the realm of self-mastery through neuroscience. And she embraces living a conscious, manifestation-aligned lifestyle. So Nadine has changed her life up many, many times, and I am so excited for us all to be inspired by her journey. So thank you so much for being here today. I'd love for you to just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what your life looks like today.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me. So today I'd say my life is pretty good in alignment with what I always wanted. I manifested meeting my perfect partner about 8.5 years ago. We've had an absolutely blissful life together so far, and very unusual, at least in my past experience. We have not had a single fight the entire length of our relationship. Which, considering some of the tumultuous relationships I had in the past, that's like a miracle. um, I manifested purchasing my mini mansion, as I call it, back in 2020, and I love my house. I love my community. I know so many amazing people here in Phoenix and across the world that are just creative, amazing, entrepreneurial, awesome people. So I'd say I got the best things in life covered right now. I'm happy on a daily basis. I conquered my stress back in like 2009-ish, 2010, and life is good. And I want to help other people have amazing lives as well.
That is the trifecta, right? I feel like that's what most people are looking for. They're looking for that person they can spend their life with in a house that they adore and call home with a great community. So that's so amazing that you found all that. But take us back to a time when, maybe you knew that was the ultimate goal, but you were unsure how to get there. What did life look like back then?
I mean, we're talking childhood, okay? Grew up in a very conservative Christian household, Seventh-day Adventist to be exact. And they're almost like Amish, but with technology. Anyway, so the path, promoted to young woman was grow up, get married, have kids. And even at a very young age, I couldn't even tell you how young I was. As far back as I can remember, I knew that wasn't me. I didn't have this burning desire to grow up and get married and have kids. I had a burning desire to be a career woman and travel the world. And I was into fashion, and, Seventh-day Adventists are very, like, plain. I loved Barbies. I wasn't allowed to have them because they were sex idols. So there was all this kind of weird dichotomy between what I wanted for my life and the things that I loved and what my family expected of me. And so I was a rebel at a very young age. The first conscious choice that I made, besides that, wanting to be a career woman and whatever, was actually in kind of rebellion. My mother was very protective. And don't get me wrong, I love my mom. She did an amazing job showing me unconditional love as best as she could. But she always was afraid, because she grew up in that environment of fear. She was always afraid that I would be molested or raped because I'm a female. And so at age 11, I believe, is when I made my first conscious declaration to the universe that I'm not going to believe that. I'm not going to live my life in fear. And I am going to consciously choose to believe that I am always safe. And that became my first solid manifestation type of thing, where I was like, I'm gonna believe this, and it's gonna be true, and this is just how the world works. And it has been true my entire life. I've always been safe.
I love that. It's interesting how when we're younger, we do make those declarations without all of the understanding of what that even means. You know, you just knew if I say this, this is going to be it. Sounds like you had a pretty sheltered childhood, and I think a lot of people can relate to that, particularly growing up in religious families, and they have these ideals of how they want you to live your life, and that is the box they put you in, and that is that. And when we break out of those boxes, that can really shake some shit up. So tell me, first of all, when you were getting ready to break out of one of these proverbial boxes that your parents put you in, what was going through your mind of what your community would think, what your parents would think, and how did you deal with that?
Honestly, I wasn't thinking about what they would think. So I was bullied in grade school, and I went to this really tiny church school, like 2 rooms for all 8 grades. And in a way, it was good because I think I learned much faster or more at that young age, being exposed not just to first grade, but all the way through fourth grade, and then in fifth grade, all the way through eighth grade. Um, but I was bullied in the first few years. And then going into fifth grade, I made friends with a boy somehow. I don't remember how we ended up being friends. We just talked to each other on the playground, right? And then, of course, my bullies decided to take it upon themselves to try bullying me for being friends with a boy. And I'm like, you know what? This boy isn't abusing me with their words like you guys do. He's a better friend. And at that point, I decided I wasn't going to care what other people thought about me because I found a different way and it was better. And so who cares what the world thinks? Who cares what the other, third graders, fifth graders, whatever, who cares what they think about me? So I kind of translated that to my whole life, not just in school, but in everything. Um and I've always been very honest and upfront with my parents. And no, they don't always approve of my choices, but I will also say that I've been fortunate in that my parents were not abusive towards me
Mm-hmm.
in those ways. And I've worked with clients that have had abusive, very, very demeaning type of parents when they're the black sheep. Fortunately, my parents were not like that. They still try to get me to read my Bible and go to church every time we talk, but they're not like telling me how bad I am, right?
Right. Right. So when you finished school and let's say the idea of finding a partner did come into your life, I'm sure before you found this wonderful partner you have now that you had your share of maybe not so perfect partners. So for somebody who might be going through the same thing where they're starting to slightly give up hope, what would you share with them?
So I was out and out a complete rebel because I knew I didn't want to get married. I started having sex, consciously chosen at a very young age as well. I had a lot of different partners and relationship styles throughout my life. Everything from good long, I mean, I've had a friend with benefits that lasted 17 years. Didn't ever really well, when I was a teenager, I wanted to have that love story. But as I got older, I realized that our life paths were not going the same direction. And so, I loved him for what it was, right? I loved him for who he was and what he was, but I knew that as a partnership, we weren't a good fit. And um, I've had long-term relationships, long-term committed relationships. I've had monogamous relationships. I've had open relationships. I've had polyamorous relationships. And I would consider myself polyamorous, but in my current relationship, we actually we dated an open relationship starting out. I was dating another person at the same time, honest with both of them. And then at some point things shifted and I said, I want to be selfish and I want you all to myself. Are you open to that, to being monogamous? So we actually have a monogamous relationship now, which started after about 4 or 5 months in, I think. Um, but as far as manifesting him, what I did and what I encourage my clients to do, well, first off, you've got to clear yourself of the past contradictory beliefs that hold
Mm-hmm.
you back. And those are often caused through things like trauma and abuse and whatever else, emotional wounds that we have that aren't healed. You need to heal from those things. And I was in a healed state when I finally met him. Um, I did a lot of self-work. I cleared my psyche of all those things that had been harmful in past relationships. And even people talk about toxic relationships or having a toxic partner. Back then I thought I had toxic partners, but it turns out I also had toxic patterns. It takes two to tango. So if you've been in toxic partnerships in the past, then you definitely need to examine what role you played in those. You've got to clear that gunk out of your psyche. And then you've got to put in new helpful beliefs. So I was lonely. I was single for, well, I say single, but I had like 3 short-term flings in that time. But for 7 years, in between my last true love relationship and this one, and I went through periods of desperate loneliness. I went through periods where I just wanted to give up. And it was really weird because in the past when I'd been single, after coming out of a toxic relationship, quote unquote, I was happy to be single. But this time I was heartbroken. And it was because I felt like I'd met the person that was everything that I wanted in a partner, and then somehow I fucked things up. Pardon my French.
That's fine.
So I had to heal from all that, and it took a long time. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't working on myself constantly during this time, right? I didn't know what I didn't know, and that's a big part of it, I think. I finally asked myself the right question one day, and the right question for me at that moment was, why do I keep being attracted to these guys that don't want me? Because I had a few crushes in that period of time and they just outright rejected me or stormed me out along or whatever. And when I asked that right question, my subconscious delivered I was doing this in meditation. I do what I call question meditations. So my subconscious is like, well, you still have this pattern of feeling unwanted from your past relationship because of your mismatch in your love languages. And I had known that consciously, but apparently I still hadn't addressed that emotional wound. And literally I untwisted that. I've gotten very good at this over the years. Untwisted that part of my brain. And that same day, I met somebody who was very good looking and a very nice, very good gentleman, very nice person, literally the same day, right? I was doing this meditation on the way to this event and I saw him. I finished the meditation about 5 minutes before we pulled into the parking lot. I saw him walking in and I just from the back, I was like, he looks interesting. And, then I actually met him at the end of the event when I was going back to my car and he was parked right near like kitty corner to where our car was parked. And so I'm like, hey, how you doing? Do I know you? So I met him. We dated for a year, but I was also in the headspace at the time of I'm too busy for a relationship. So we had a good casual friends with benefits relationship. We did lots of co-working stuff. He was also entrepreneurial, really nice, really good guy. And I loved him, but I've always felt that kind of unconscious pushback when I thought about telling him, like, he doesn't want to know this. He is not, like, we're not on the same path either, right? And then I decided to refocus back on everything that I really did want, which is the key to manifestation right there. That's it. Just think only always about what you do want. That's it. Period. End of story. All the other stuff is just ways to get clear of all the stuff you don't want that you're constantly thinking about. So I focused back on what I did want, and I had made a list in 2016. And as part of my book of what I wanted in a relationship, I made this list to give, my readers as kind of an example of things, to spark their creativity. And I said, I'm going to refocus. I want the perfect match. I want somebody that floats floats my boat, that my partner in crime, so to speak, although I don't do crimes. Um, you know, and I did, and it was about, oh, I'm going to say I think it was about 2 weeks from the time I made that decision, refocused back on the full list of what I wanted in a man, in a relationship, and I met him. And that's history. And like I said, I was still dating the other guy when we first started dating. Told both of them about each other. They were both cool with it, and I was like, cool. So, but eventually then I decided to get selfish, and I was like, no, I want you all to myself. I want all the pets. Nobody else can have the pets. Uh, so we did become monogamous, but I'm a huge proponent of making conscious relationship agreements. So the big kind of baked in clause in our agreement for me was that if or when either of us ever becomes attracted to another person, that we have the freedom to discuss that at that time and decide what we're going to do about it, if anything. And just having that freedom for me has been huge. Like, I believe in polyamory, but I'm not actively looking for anyone else. And I've had a couple, in 8.5 years, I've exercised that clause twice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been one of the times it was, I don't really want to do anything about it. I just wanted to express that this is what I felt, right? This
Yeah.
person was attracted to me and I kind of was attracted back, but nah, I don't really want to do anything. The other occasion was kissing a former partner, and I said, is it okay with you if I kiss them? Just for like nostalgia's sake, right? And it was cool. So
That's
that's
amazing.
been, yeah, it's
So,
been the best relationship.
lots to unpack there. I think, first of all, I think it's beautiful your self exploration and really tapping into what is it that I want to do, whether that comes to your sexuality and being in polyamorous relationships. Having the power to look inside of yourself and choose for yourself is so huge. And you mentioned a couple things that are pretty potent in there about unwiring your brain. You realize that, okay, if I'm calling in, what do I want? Here's my list of what I want. What's holding me back from getting there? And you started to unpack that and really bring it to the surface. And I'd love for you to just talk a bit more about what that process looked like for you.
Oh gosh. Well, okay, so I have to take you back into my history again. I have been a student all my life. So my process of what I teach and practice with others is going to be a little bit different than what I did on myself because I was still learning things.
Sure.
Um but that said, the tools that I use now, I was starting to use then, like when I, you know, fixed my little unwanted wounding. That
Mm-hmm.
was based on neurolinguistic programming, which is a tool that is hugely helpful in making effective change happen quickly in the brain. Um and that's one of the tools I've actually used to make my own tools, because basically neurolinguistic programming is a modeling process. It's understanding how our brains work and how to use that to make changes. So I use some standard NLP processes like the VKD technique for trauma healing in my programs, but I've also built my own tools based on how I observed myself in manifesting things when I manifested them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so as far as unwiring and rewiring, I've had to do that multiple times, in past um my first long-term partner was my kid's dad, and he was an alcoholic, and he was verbally abusive. And he would get mad at me if somebody gave me a compliment, he would get mad at me.
Yeah.
Like, that's, like, don't be attractive. I don't know. You know, he was very jealous and insecure. And so when I got out of that relationship with him when I was 21, 22, we were together 4 years, and I had to reprogram myself then to be able to accept a compliment without
Mm-hmm.
fear. Um, to be able to accept a compliment without thinking that the only reason this person is telling me something nice about me is because they want to sleep with me. That's a very sociological program.
Yeah,
And
I think
yeah,
that's a big one. I think that one's pretty universally
it's believed to be true, but it's not always necessarily true.
no.
And it describes the like people only have one motive. Um so yeah, I had to do that, and ultimately it is a process of just consciously examining those ideas and choosing, but depending on how deep it goes, you might need to do some unconscious, dialogue, or get in there and talk directly to the subconscious mind, because we absorb all kinds of patterns and beliefs without even being consciously aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that broke me up with that last long-term partner that I was so in love with, that I was so heartbroken over, we both had unconscious conflict patterns. Well, he was actually conscious of what his pattern was, and he would even explain it to me sometimes, but I had no idea how to interpret what he was telling me. So he had a pattern from being brutally abused as a child. I mean, I'm talking like being punched through a wall. And his pattern, which he expressed to me a few times, was to try to diffuse the situation if there was any emotional upset. So what this would look like in our relationship was, if I was upset with him, he would try to comfort me and cuddle me, which is good because I'm a physical touch. One of my love languages is physical touch. But he would try to hold me and tell me all the things that he did that showed me he loved me, and he tried to diffuse the situation. And essentially he was like saying, "Hey, I'm a good guy, don't hurt me." But I didn't know that. And when he would do that, I would fight him on that. And he asked me a few times, like, "Why do you react that way? Why?" And because I had an unconscious pattern I wasn't even aware of, when he would ask me, I'd be like, "Well, of course I would react that way. You did this and this happened and you said this and blah, 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 blah." All the things.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until after the breakup and reading multiple relationship books, and one night, and doing a lot of deep soul searching, like what went wrong, right? Because I was so in love with this guy and so heartbroken when it ended. And it really ended. It was like the stupidest breakup ever. Sorry, I gotta digress to kind of give the full picture.
Yeah.
It was the stupidest breakup ever. What happened was, we were hanging out one night at the house. He was drinking, I was not. I've always been a sober water drinker. And he goes, "I think we should just be friends." And I was like, "Why do you say that?" And he goes, "Because I don't make you happy." And I was flabbergasted,
Mm-hmm.
because I was the happiest I'd ever been in my life, right? And so he went to bed a little tipsy. I went to bed sober and hurt. And I stewed in that hurt all night. And, that thing of hurt turns to anger, anger turns to resentment, yada yada. Resentment turns to revenge. I woke up we got up in the morning, and if I hadn't said anything, we probably wouldn't have broken up. At least not then. Not that way. Because he was tipsy, he probably wouldn't have, we probably could have talked about it some more, maybe. But I woke up and I said, "You're right, we probably should just be friends." And it was stupid. We were both heartbroken. Like, his friends were coming to me, telling me how heartbroken he was. I was heartbroken. It was just ridiculous. But 6 months of soul searching, reading all kinds of relationship books, trying to figure out what the fuck went wrong. And it finally clicked in my head. Something in 2 different books that I had read came together. And I realized what my unconscious pattern was. And it was actually a conflict pattern caused by my parents' divorce, which at the time, I went to counseling. Me and my siblings, I was the oldest, I was 10. And so I don't remember if it was the counselor that said it or somebody said, well, at least you're old enough to understand that your parents' divorce isn't your fault. And I was like, yay, yes, I am old enough to understand that, right? So I grew up thinking that it hadn't affected me. But in reality, it did affect me on an unconscious level because before my parents divorced, they had a rule of never fight in front of the kids, which is a good rule if you can't stop yourself from fighting in the first place. I don't know how often they fought or if, I only heard raised voices behind closed doors once in my life growing up. And one other time in the car, like we're driving and my dad was driving and my mom was navigating, and it was the typical like sexist bicker, like, I think we were supposed to turn. No, I know where I'm going, like that's it. In 10 years, no fights beyond those two little barely heard instances. After the divorce, they fought constantly, and they fought through us kids.
Yeah.
And you know what they fought about? Who was the better parent, right? Vote for me in court. Tell the judge you want to live with your mother. Tell the judge you want to live with your father. Your mom this, your dad that. Like, it was constant. At 15, I told both of my parents that I didn't want to hear them talk crap about each other anymore. But, 5 years of that can soak in. And so when my partner was reacting on his trauma trigger, right, of any emotional upset can lead to heavy abuse, and he was like, hey, don't hurt me, I'm a good guy, here's all the way I show you I love you, blah, blah, blah. What was I doing? What was I hearing? I was hearing or feeling like he was saying, I'm the better partner in this relationship. You don't have a right to be upset. And I was fighting for the validation of my feeling. Well, of course I have a right to be upset. This happened and you said this and blah, blah, blah. So just finally recognizing that pattern, I was able to let it go. To go, wait, wow, wow. All this time when he was doing that and he was cuddling me and telling me all the things that he did that showed me he cared, I could have been reacting with appreciation. You're right. You are an amazing partner. And you know what? My upset about the housework is, although valid, doesn't take away from how great of a person you are. Right?
Yeah.
But these things, like we both had our parts to play. And I've seen this in relationships over and over when partners are triggering each other. It's like their patterns are just made to lock together. And when we untangle those, literally relationships come back to life. I've had so many partners that, worked with as clients where their trauma patterns were just like fit to a T, and it's wild. It's almost like we attract the person that can help us overcome that crap.
That was exactly what I was about to say, that partners are the biggest mirrors. And whenever things start to come up inside of you that are making you so annoyed at that person, that is such a gift, because that is your chance to look inside and be like, what is it? And, sometimes it doesn't come right away. Like, it took you 6 months of reading and soul searching and asking yourself over and over and over again, why didn't this work, for that to be able to come to the surface and you release that. And another beautiful thread I heard through all of your stories really lies in communication. And you said with your partner currently that you guys have this contract, and if something comes up where you're attracted to another person, like, you both consciously are like, let's discuss this, instead of letting something build or feeling like something's been hidden. And I would love for you to just talk a bit more about that, because I know a lot of times people are scared to really speak, their truth, even to their partners, because sometimes they say, oh, this person can't handle it. But when you take a step back and you look at it, it has nothing to do with that person. It's, you might not be able to handle what they might say. It has nothing to do with the person, and you're projecting that on them. So I'd love for you to go a bit deeper into how you learned to communicate this openly.
Oh my gosh. Again, years and years. But really, part of it came down to that decision on the playground when I was in 5th grade, right? I'm not gonna let what you think about me influence how I feel about myself or about my choices. Um, so having that kind of baked into my personality. But honestly, I think anybody can learn to communicate openly and honestly. And in fact, that's, half of the work I do with people is getting them to that point where they're able to be open and honest and communicate and just live their life, in alignment with who they are instead of in conformity to everybody else's boxes. Um, So how do I it's a layering process. How I teach it now is a lot simpler, right? Because you don't have to go through 20 years of life to figure this out. We can do it in 6 months. Uh, but yeah, it's again just getting clear, and communication happens first within us, about us, to ourselves, right? You can't be clear and open and honest with somebody else if you're confused about who you are and what you want and why you want it and all of those things. So that's step one, is really getting to that deep honesty within ourselves and being okay with whatever it is. Or if we're not okay with it, taking the steps to remedy that. Like, of course, I wasn't okay with having that conflict pattern of believing that partners have to one up each other, like I didn't, that, that wasn't part of my worldview that I wanted to keep. Um, but there's been other parts, like the part where I said, well, I'm cool regardless of what other people think about me, that I'm fine with keeping, right? That
Mm-hmm.
came as a result of bullying, but it's, I think, a healthy attitude to have, because nobody else can make me feel a way. I have to participate in that. I have to actively participate in feeling something. So that's
Mm-hmm.
number one. Literally, like the very first step in my program is training people to have emotional mastery and knowing that you choose how you feel, that you can choose how you feel, and here's how. And in any given moment. And I literally reprogram my emotional baseline and help others do that. And what that is basically like your day in, day out emotional state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like some people are anxiety, or some people have depression, or some people have, um, triggers, PTSD, whatever. All of that is trained, it's learned. Our emotions are trained, and we can retrain them.
Mm-hmm. So something that I've noticed is pretty common among people, and you've mentioned, you have to be very clear on what it is you want. And that's pretty challenging for a lot of people to actually be that clear on what it is they want. And even if they have an idea, we'll continue to use partnership as an example. Let's say they have an idea of what it is that they want in a partnership, but there's still those worthiness beliefs underneath where they don't quite believe they can actually have what they want. So then what do? They settle,
Mm-hmm.
and then the patterns repeat themselves and they wonder why. And then they pick another person. They're like, damn, how come I keep picking all of these men that are so similar? Even though I know what I want, there's still a bit of work there to be able to truly believe inside of you that you can have what it is you want. And, what's meant for you can't miss you.
Mm-hmm.
So before we move on from partnership, I'd just love for you to give people who are kind of stuck right there, what kind of advice would you give them?
So yeah, if you're dating the same person over and over again in different bodies, that's definitely a trauma pattern. That's definitely a trauma pattern. It goes beyond beliefs and into, well, beliefs are basically like the blueprint for our reality, and you're going to manifest whatever it is that you believe. And but with trauma, you've got probably like a network of beliefs that are self-supporting. So yeah, trauma healing, step one. Step two, emotional baseline repatterning. Step three, learning how to literally manipulate your own brain. I call it the brain director training.
Mm-hmm.
And then step four, new beliefs installation. So you
Mm-hmm.
got to clear out the old, learn how to, master yourself, your internal world, and then you can install new consciously chosen beliefs directly into the subconscious, which is where the magic happens. And it's not easy, but it can be simple. And it doesn't have to take that long. Like, I've worked with people that were going to therapy for years, and didn't have any or very little results, right? Like, oh, I had this breakthrough, 6 months ago, and I understood something about my. Look, this is not like the type of stuff I'm talking about doing is not about having breakthroughs. It's about house cleaning, massive house cleaning, and neurolinguistic programming makes that so much easier than regular therapy. It just teaches your brain how to do the house cleaning you don't need to dredge up what happened when you were 5 years old. You don't need to dredge up whatever abuse. The details don't matter. This is how your brain functions, and we teach it how to clear out that stuff that doesn't serve you, and we do that a few times and get it all out. Clear. That takes like a month. The whole initial stage takes like a month, and it's so fast and easy, and people don't even realize it. Like, I feel so bad when I see people posting about, oh, I have social anxiety, or I have this problem or that problem. I'm like, I can help you in like a month.
Yeah.
It only takes a month. But some people are attached to their problems. That's the flip side of the coin. If you're attached to your problems, then I can't, nobody can do anything for you. If you're ready to move on, then yes, it can be quick and simple and easy.
Absolutely. So the word trauma in general, that I had a lot of resistance towards that in my healing journey, because everybody likes to push, oh, this is a trauma response. This is a trauma response. And you hear it over and over and over again. And I was like, my God, I didn't have a traumatic life. But what I realized was I was just comparing traumas. In my mind, trauma was something big and huge and explosive that happened. And I was like, I don't have that. And so I think the word trauma in general just has a very negative connotation. And when people hear that, they reject it. They don't feel like they've had any. They reject all of the healing. I did that for so long. But I just want to let everybody know that it's not that. Trauma doesn't have to correlate abuse and explosive, horrible things. It can be something as small as witnessing a pattern in other people that you just unconsciously picked up on that has been running your life. Maybe you witness something very small, maybe a parent cheating on the other parent, or even just talking about it. In anything like that, you may have unconsciously picked up on that, and that developed a pattern inside of you. And so what would you say to people like me who were just like, I'm tired of hearing that I have trauma. I reject that completely, which then is keeping them from doing the healing that they may need.
I used to be the same way. I didn't think I had any trauma. I had a pretty bucolic life, growing up, kind of an idyllic life as a kid, and nothing major bad happened, in my opinion. So maybe a better word for those people who resisted like you and I used to is emotional wounds. And even then, a lot of times we're not even aware. Like, the very first time I did a subconscious block clearing exercise, I had no idea. First off, the first part of the exercise is, if you had to sum up in one word whatever's blocking you, what would that word be? What came up for me was unworthy. I had no idea. I had no idea that I even had that unconscious belief or feeling of unworthiness, because I thought I was very optimistic. I thought I had very good self-esteem. So it was pretty astonishing to me that when asked to focus on what's blocking you, that's what came up. And then when they did the exercise to go in and heal where that came from, what it was nothing abusive, nothing overt. Me and my dad had come into my room. I was like maybe 3 years old, 3 or 4. My dad had come into my room to take a nap. He lay down on the bed with me. This is not going anywhere you might think it might going, right? We're laying there. I used to flip my pillow to get to the cool side when I was a kid. I don't know if you did that, but I was
Still
flipping
do.
my pillow, and I was probably transitioning through my favorite 4 sleep positions, and this went on for maybe 5 or 10 minutes when my dad snapped at me. Now, before this happened, I was feeling special. I was feeling like, oh, my dad wants to spend time with me and he's cuddling with me, right? Guess what? My 2 love languages, physical touch, quality time with a small words of affirmation segment. Anyway, he snaps at me out of nowhere. Can't you just lay still? Immediately, bam, dagger to the heart. All the feelings of specialness gone in that moment. That's where my unworthiness. So it wasn't something overt. My dad didn't beat me up. He didn't essay me. It was just a careless adult comment at a moment when I felt something completely different. It was a shock.
Mm-hmm. See, it's little things like that that send a shock through our nervous system. That can be what trauma is. It's as simple as that. It's something that shocks you. Like, I'll share a bit of my story. So now here I am. I started a podcast. My voice is everywhere. I'm showing up on social media. And I had silenced my voice for so long. And I was like, not in public situations, but I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to talk. And I actually didn't really sing for a long time. And I used to love singing. And when I was really thinking about this, and I was like, what could have stopped me in my life? What could have happened? And then it came to me immediately. Middle school singing competition. And for some reason that day I was just off, and I adored my choir teacher. I loved her so much. And in the middle of the competition, me and 2 other young girls are singing, and I, for some reason that day, could not harmonize at all, and we lost the singing competition. And I remember the moment when I was not able to harmonize with the other girls, and my teacher looking at me with this just look of, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you not doing this? You know how to do it. And there was something in that moment that like triggered me of, oh my gosh, I can't do this. My voice isn't good enough. And all of these beliefs just got ingrained inside of me. And I didn't consciously choose that. I didn't consciously choose to just shut down my voice. It was a massive trigger to my nervous system. I was super embarrassed. And then there you go. There was a block that lasted for years.
Right.
So it really all comes down to just being the detective of our own lives and looking back on our history and just seeing, like, where could I have shunned myself, So you've taken us on this beautiful journey of your relationships. And I know, a lot of times, like, relationships and health and career, everything is intertwined, right? And I know you've said that you have had multiple businesses. So I would love for you to just take us down your journey of finding out what it is you want to do in the world to make money.
Well, okay, so that's interesting that you phrase it that way. And that was what most of my businesses were. This business I'm in currently that I've had since 2010 is the first and only business I started just for the pure passion of, I love, I found out the secret and I got to share with the world. No, but actually I didn't start this one to make money. I actually started it because of, my overriding goal to transform society, but but yeah, the first 9 businesses that I had were just, okay, what can I do to make money, right? My first, well, it wasn't a formal business, but when I was 10 years old, my mom got like these 3 big boxes, like huge, like 3-foot cube boxes of beads, and she turned me loose on them, and I made jewelry and pedaled around the neighborhood on my bicycle and sold it. I had this one customer that was like a regular. She would bring me pierced earrings to turn into clip-ons because she didn't have pierced ears and she didn't want to get her ears pierced, So that was my first business, and that was fun. I did it. There's always been an element of something I enjoy with most of my businesses, except for the first formal business I started when I was 18. I called it Squeaky Clean, and I cleaned houses, And I realized after about 6 months or so that I really don't enjoy the act of cleaning. Like, I like the result, do not like the act of doing it. So that one I quit. I was like, nope, no more of this. But all my other businesses have been both kind of a combination of what do I enjoy or like, um, or even something that I want to know. Like, I joined Primerica for 3 or 4 years, because I wanted to understand finances better. And I did, got a great education working through them. That's like it's a multi-level marketing, independent sales rep type of thing, your own business, independent contractor.
Hmm.
So yeah, all of those were they were ways to make money. And I learned a lot about entrepreneurship and about how money works and how the world works and all kinds of different lessons from each one. But yeah, what I do now is mainly because just out of passion.
Hmm.
And it was actually because I had this huge goal for the world. I believe that we do have the technology. It's not a belief. We have the technology right now where we could automate everything and just let people live freely. And we'd probably have to eliminate a monetary system to do so. So I was talking about this with people when I first started, brainstorming the idea and kind of spitballing things and slowly refining it. And I got it down really refined, like 16 systems that we would need to redesign or create designs for, blueprints for. And I was talking to people about this, and I actually ran for Congress in like a kind of underground, um I forget what they call themselves, sovereign citizen movement or whatever,
Hmm.
back on this platform of let's redesign society. And I'd be talking to people about it, and then they'd give me like the standard four objections was, well, we don't have the technology. And I'm like, well, yeah, we do actually. There's this, like this part, skyscraper farms, and if cars are built with robots and robots can fix cars and like all that, um and then they'd be like, well, okay, but if nobody has to work, then what's going to keep people motivated? And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, if you didn't have to work, what would you want to spend your time doing? And they'd tell me. And I'd be like, okay, so if you were able to do that, then what difference does it make if Joe down the street is doing what he wants to do with his time? And they'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Well, okay, but it's going to take a bloody revolution. Or, it's going to take like 100 years. And I'm like, no, we have the technology, and we can do this peacefully. I have a plan, and spell that out for them. At the end, they'd be like, wow, that sounds like a great idea. Like, I would love to see that happen. It sounds like you've really thought through everything, but people just aren't ready for this. So that's actually why I started coaching, because I was like, if the world's not ready for this, then I need to teach enough people to get the world ready for this, because we can have an everyday utopia. We can have that. We can have it today. It would take like maybe 2 or 3 years to fully build out.
So
So,
I'm curious. So I speak a lot with people about, imagine, especially when people are trying to figure out what they want to do to work, where they enjoy their work, but they still make money, because as of now, we all still need that to keep living.
right?
And when I ask people what their ideal day looks like, it's fascinating to me how many people, even if they don't consider themselves creative, there's something in their day that is creative, whether it's dancing or baking, or it's using their body to create something in their day. And so I'm curious, with all of the people you've spoken with about, what would you do if we were living in this kind of society? Does it have a creative undertone?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And my whole, when I came up with this concept, I was poor I was poor growing up. My parents were like at the poverty level. We had Medicaid, food stamps, whatever, like half the time. Um, so I was like, seeing people work these soulless, soul-sucking jobs just to earn a living.
Barely a living.
Right. And why should we have to earn a living? Like, where does that come from? And just examining these kind of societal underpinning
Constructs. Yeah.
beliefs. It's Darwinian. Like, we've applied Darwinism to our lifestyle, and we've made the ability to make money the test of fitness. It's weird. It's really weird when you're coming from outside the box and looking at things like the way they are structured. Really weird. Not only that, but we've got an economic system that doesn't work. Like, it periodically collapses, right? And throws everything into chaos. Why should we have, and people would say, like, well, if you want to make change, you got to work within the system. I'm like, why should we have to work within a system that's broken? Why don't we just redesign the system? So I am literally a genius. I just found that out recently. But, I've been a long-time reader of all these different sci-fi ideas, which sci-fi is the best for stretching your imagination of what could be. And yeah, if people had the freedom to just do what they love, 95 or better percent of the people that I talked to were like, yeah, I would do something that I love, like creating some architecture,
Gardening.
yeah, like
Yeah.
there's all kinds of stuff that people really
Writing books.
love. I love reading and writing. I already do that. Like, I've figured out how to do that in my life. But yeah, people have an innate creativity. We are, well, if you want to talk about philosophy, I believe that we're all sparks of the divine consciousness. That we're all just part of one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, and every experience is valid. And to put it more prosaically, Buckminster Fuller wrote, like, he was a proponent of UBI, universal basic income.
Yeah.
And, again, the naysayers were like, well, but if nobody had to work, like, what's going to stop people from going fishing all day? And he's like, maybe we should let them. Let them go fishing. You know what happens when you're fishing? You sit there and you think deep thoughts. We need more people that can just sit there and think deep thoughts. Maybe that guy will come up with a poem that'll change the world in 20 years, or something new that nobody's seen before that makes everything even that much better.
Absolutely. Thinking the deep thoughts.
Right?
Magic
and UBI,
happens.
it's funny because even in the US, we've had small-scale UBI experiments where people were given a set amount and allowed to, they didn't have to qualify, not like our welfare programs. They didn't have to, like, debase themselves to qualify. They just gave everybody a set amount every month, let them do what they want. You know what people did with it in every single experiment? They bettered themselves in their lives.
Yeah.
They didn't waste it on junk food or whatever, but who cares if they did? They went out and they used it to better their lives. They started businesses, they got education, they bought necessary things like housing,
Yeah.
So yeah, we need a free, and yes, we do still have to make money. I charge a huge amount when I work with somebody one-on-one, but I also have a lot of resources that are low cost for people that can't afford that level of service. Yes, we still have to trade whatever for money in this society, but my ultimate goal is to make that obsolete.
I love this. This has been such an interesting conversation. And so we have a little bit of time left, and I'd love for you to mention some of the books that you have written.
Sure. Well, you can see them behind me. My Living the Naked Life, that's about conscious manifestation. I Am That I Am, that's kind of just like a coffee table book. It's a meditative experience. And Secret Weapons of Mass Orgasm, which is my book about relationships.
Love this.
And I'm working on my next one or two. I'm definitely going to write a book about the Satorian Nation project. That's my project, my Utopia project. that's going to take me a while because I have to do a lot of research and digging down and finding all those resources and like, where do they have skyscraper farms? I know I read about it in like 2011. I have no idea where that, did I bookmark it? But I'm working on
You'll get there. So it sounds like you're just such a go-getter, multiple businesses, really getting clear on what it is you want, writing books, finding the partner, all of the things. And from our conversation so far, it really sounds like you have just created a very clear image in your head and then you go for it. And so what advice would you give someone who, maybe they have the clear vision, but they're still just not sure what steps to even take to get going?
It's actually funny. My one of my most recent clients came to me because I said, you got to have the big vision. And he's like, I don't have the big vision. So there's exercises for that too. But yeah, if it depends. It depends where you're at. Again, where I start with everybody is doing the clearing of the junk and training, brain and emotional mastery and installing new beliefs. And then we move on through physical mind body mastery, which is another month or two, depending. And then we move into relationship training, which is these are the steps that I think that work the best for total life transformation. And what I do, what I would call my services is lifestyle by design, right? So lifestyle by design, you got to master your brain, your emotions, your body, and then master relationship skills, and then entrepreneurship skills, and then at the last month or so of the year-long program is the cherry on top lifestyle things like manifesting the circumstances and events and environments and stuff like that and more other people. But you're going to be doing some of that all along the way. But that's the order that I think works best. And after doing this for 15 years, mind, body, and emotional mastery, then relationship, which is heavily focused on communication, but it's more than just communication. It's really mastering the relationships that you have with yourself, ultimately.
Yeah.
And then from that, learning how to communicate effectively, because communication is more than just words. It's there's a ton of factors that go into it, including understand how your own brain works and how other people's brains work. Like, have you seen all that stuff about like how some people have an inner narrative and some don't? Some people are able to visualize and some aren't. Like, understanding all that can play a huge role in communication. Anyway, sorry, I could talk about that all day. But yeah, that's the order that I go through is mind body mastery, communication and relationship skills mastery, entrepreneurship, and then the cherry on top of overall lifestyle.
I love this. And so just to wrap it up here, what lasting advice would you give a listener who's really ready to just step into the new version of themselves? And then if you want to tell everyone where they can find you, how to work with you, your books, I will link all of that in the show notes for those of you who would like to connect with her. But yeah, what do you have left to say to the audience?
Actually 3 things. Make a decision, because a lot of the times we're not even making that decision, right? We're just waffling about things.
Yes.
Make a freaking decision. Make an assessment, like old Greg says. Make a decision and follow through on it. Take action. Even if that action is writing down the goal. Even if that action is brainstorming the goal, right? Like, what's the biggest decision you can make? I want to have a life that's perfect for me. That's a, pie in the sky, whatever. But making that decision lays the groundwork. And then follow through, do something. Do something about it. Keep doing something about it. And number 3, always and only focus only on what you do want. And I'm talking about in everything, like and it comes out in the way you speak. So one of the little tips and tricks I give people is start changing everything that you say to speak only in the positive. For example, rather than saying, I don't want to be late to work, what do you want? I want to be on time, right? Instead of saying, well, like, I'm going to wear a mask because I don't want to get sick. What do you want? I want to remain healthy. And it's in our language. It's so endemic, pardon me, in our culture for people to say constantly what they don't want, what they don't want. Don't forget this. Don't leave that there, whatever. Get rid of the word don't or the word not and all its contractions. So don't, can't, wouldn't, shouldn't, isn't, all of those. Get rid of that word.
Yeah.
It forces you, and you have to, it takes time, it takes practice, but you have to pay attention to the words that are coming out of your mouth and speak only what you do want. What that forces you to reframe what you think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, so it's kind of a backwards process, but again, it's a lot easier doing the mental and emotional mastery stuff first. Makes it come more natural. But yeah, those would be the top 3 pieces of advice I have for anybody. Make a decision, do something about it, and only focus on what you do want, what you do enjoy, what you do love.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. And it's a game you can start playing with yourself right now. Tomorrow,
Yes.
just notice throughout your day what's coming out of your mouth. And if you notice yourself saying something that you don't want or you don't like, flip it right there in the moment.
What's the opposite?
Yes. And you'll be quite surprised at how often it does come up where you're like, wow, this is every day I'm consciously or unconsciously thinking about all the stuff I don't want. And I'm wondering why everything is the way it is in my life.
Right?
Yes. Beautiful advice to leave us with. And then just a bit about where people can find you if they would like to learn more. And then I will put all of that in the show notes.
Sure. My website is goddessnadine.com. That's GODDESSNADINE.com. And
Perfect.
I am on there. And all my socials are at the bottom of the main, bottom of the site there. So if you want to follow me on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or wherever you like to consume stuff, I'm there, probably.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It has been a fascinating journey you've taken us on. And I hope for those of you listening that you found something in her story that you can relate with and you realize, okay, like, let me drop some of the self-judgment. Let me believe in myself a bit more. Let me stop caring what other people think about me and just start taking action. The choice is yours. You can recreate your life at any time you want. Thank you so much for joining.
100%. Love you. Thank you.